And it needs to be taken in the context of a little bit wider view of the world as well, because the government is going to supposedly invest $1.5 billion in a lot of fibre to homes as well. And one of the main uses for that fibre is going to be video services. So, there is going to be a situation where there are going to be lots of substitutes for terrestrial broadcast services. Now, they still may be required, but maybe they're not required as much. And that sort of substitution is going to occur over the same time frame. So we've got a whole lot of variables happening which leave one with a lot of uncertainty as to exactly what the picture is going to look like.
Perhaps, Ian, maybe just think of us a little further. And we talked about New Zealand, but surely the USA must be in exactly the same situation where they are also moving to digital TV, and no doubt there's very little white space left after they complete that process. They already are on digital, actually, largely, except for some low power stations. So how come they can find space, white space, in digital TV, but we can't?
I'm not sure that I can answer that fully. As you say, in the US, they already have realised their digital dividend spectrum in the top 100 megahertz or so, above 698, is it, megahertz. And they just, as a sideline, that went to auction and was sold to 2 network operators. And if we'd got a small portion of that as a loan to New Zealand, it would have cleared our national debt quite nicely. The figure, I think, was 19.7 billion US dollars, I think was what, is that correct? That's what the spectrum sold for. Anyway, that doesn't answer your question. Below that, the digital television was introduced and re-channeled. Now, I understand that the implementation of that spectrum plan was scheduled to take place in February this year, and I think it's been deferred. The analogue switch off has not yet happened. Am I right?
It's supposed to have happened because it was only delayed until
May, was it?
May or June.
Okay.
End of June.
So that analogue switch off would precede the rechanneling to get all the digital to a tighter packing in the lower end. But I'm less familiar with the culture of how much translator infill and so on is used in the US. Because the US has such a high penetration of cable television and satellite television, I think that the coverage expectations are different from what we have here. Certainly in New Zealand, most of the primary stations have additional infill translators as well in order to provide the coverage. Perhaps less so in Christchurch, but certainly throughout most of the country.
In the US, the government gave away vouchers for the need to buy set-top boxes for the services. Cost billions of dollars.
Thanks, Peter. Thanks, Peter. Are there any other comments on that issue? Okay, next question. Mr. Wallace.
My first thing is probably more of a comment than anything else. It seems to me that this cognitive radio thing has actually been going on for a heck of a lot longer than anybody on the panel is admitting to. I believe that we've had primary and secondary allocations on the radio frequency spectrum for a long time, which in fact is cognitive radio. The secondary transmitter must check first. If the primary is transmitting, they must cease transmission. All we're doing is moving it from a brain into a chip. My question, though, actually relates to something different. I was listening to the explanations before about sharing out spectrum and how things ought to be done properly and so on and so forth, and it brought to mind the fact that as a bellhead, I have been dragged kicking and screaming into the nethead universe. In the Bell universe, or in the telephony universe, everything was nicely structured, everything was allocated, you knew how to do things, you did things in particular ways, you did not share, you had your own channel for everything. And then I was given the task by one of my clients of managing an IP telephony rollout, and discovered about shared and packets colliding and CSMA CD and all those kind of things and so on as well. I'm wondering whether part of our challenge in this whole cognitive radio area is that we've all got our bellhead hats on, or our this is the way you do it command. Somebody used the term command and control, I think. Command and control hats on. We can't actually see that. I believe benefit is the term used. The benefits that come. You made the comment. The benefits came from wireless local area networks. in a benefits per hertz type thing. Maybe we have to put on a new head to actually understand and think differently about not how do we protect cellular, or how do we protect television, or how do we protect military, or in my case, how do we protect the amateurs, but how do we actually make the best use of the spectrum, and taking into account there'll be all these legacy issues of television, radio, broadcasting, links, and so on and so forth. I'm wondering what the panel has, whether that's too philosophical for this time in the afternoon.
It's very interesting that in actual fact this exact issue has started to arise through various conversations on the internet at the moment. It's arisen actually through the conversation that's occurring in the US at the moment around the AT&T's stopping the use of iPhones with Skype and like services. And the debate has gone a little further to say, you know, maybe there are totally different paradigms that should be actually put into place. And those sorts of paradigms are completely an antithesis of what the telco history is all about. And that would include everything being unlicensed spectrum, everything being packet-based, everything being competitive, everything being based on a broadband infrastructure with applications end-to-end. And do you need to worry about the quality of service issues at all? And so that debate's been around for quite a while, but I must admit this latest incident has revived it again, and there's a lot of literature starting to be floating around the internet at the moment on that subject.
I'll do it without the mic. I totally agree with you, Murray. And what no one has actually mentioned in that conversation, though, is that what's killing the big guys who are trying to do all this stuff at the moment is they just don't have the backhaul to handle the data load. And backhaul has become the bottleneck in the high-speed networking area, particularly in the US. And not quite here, because we're still pretty low on the data totem pole.